Pushkin. Hey everyone, welcome back to Risky Business, a show about making better decisions. I'm Maria Konnikova.
And I'm Nate Silver. Today, we have a lot to get into. We are literally hours away and across the street from the World Series of Poker. We'll talk about that.
We'll also be talking about some huge news in the crypto sphere, the approval of the ETH ETFs. And crypto is something that is very firmly in the realm of risky business, even though we haven't talked about it yet on the show.
And finally, inspired by an unexpected detour I took to Buffalo, New York on the way into Las Vegas, we'll talk about new rules by the Department of Transportation governing compensation for if your flight is late and how that might affect the risk-taking behavior of both passengers and airlines.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that one, Nate, because my flight was also very, very late.
You did not end up in Buffalo.
I did not end up in Buffalo, Nate.
I was in Buffalo, Maria.
Okay, Buffalo, you win
sure.
this one, and I look forward to getting into it at the end of the show. Let's begin, though, with the fact that we both got here. So we are both in fabulous Las Vegas for the opening of the World Series of Poker. And we are taping this on Tuesday, May 28th, which is literally the opening day of the World Series. And you and I will both be playing the first opening event, which is a $5,000 Players Championship, which is exciting. And I mean, I'm excited. Are you excited, Nate?
Yeah, I've never actually been here for the exact start of the World Series before. It's a lot better than the end, right? We were there till the bitter end last year. The end is kind of depressing. They're like literally tearing the building down. The beginning, everyone's bankrolls are full. Everybody is in a good mood. This is a new event this year to start out with a 5K. Usually it's something smaller. I'll be curious to see what type of field it draws. Usually 5K is like high enough that the amateur players are a little bit dissuaded by it, but
it's the first
has
event.
Their full bankrolls. It's the first event. I think some of the pros from Europe are taking their time in getting here, so it might be a pretty good field. We will see.
Yeah. So for anyone who wants to join us this summer, or anyone who is just thinking about doing the World Series or something that is kind of this sort of marathon experience where you have to keep making good, risky decisions over and over and over. It doesn't even have to be poker. Nate and I have both come up with our top 3 tips for dealing with a situation like this. And we're going to be talking about it in the context of the World Series. But I do want to always keep in mind that it can be abstracted to other decision-making situations. And we don't know each other's top tips. So I'm going to start we're going to go one at a time and throw out one tip. And these are actually in our order of importance, and react and see whether we're thinking about this in the same way or in very different ways. It would be very fun either way. And like I said, we have no idea what the other person is going to say. Although I have more idea than Nate, because Nate did have a list of his top 21 tips for the World Series on his newsletter. So there's that, but he's seen nothing from me. But actually I wrote a book about it, so maybe he has some idea too. All right. My top tip would be, number 1, take care of yourself. People are here to play poker and they get super excited. I'm really excited. And they forget the basics, like get exercise, get sleep, and eat good food. And by good food, I don't mean like food that you're going to be like, oh yeah, this is delicious. I mean, actually nourishing food that's good for your brain, good for your decision making. And there's a lot of science on this. All of these things matter when you're trying to make good decisions. If you haven't slept well, your decision making capacity is going to go downhill. If you've been inside all day, if you haven't been moving, if you haven't exercised, if you haven't gotten that blood flow going, your decision making capacity is going to go downhill. If you're eating crap, your decision-making capacity, once again, is going to go downhill. There's even a funny study. It's one of my kind of pet favorite psych studies because it's so ridiculous, that shows that your risk-taking propensities become less than optimal when you have to go to the bathroom. Right? If you have to pee, you actually start evaluating risks incorrectly. Mind and body are intimately connected. Decision-making ability is intimately related to how we're physically feeling. And so I want to urge people to not forget about that. You just want to go out. You want to play everything. Like, I will not be going out for drinks. I'm sorry. Please do not take this personally. After an event, I'm going to be going straight to bed because I think that these things are incredibly important. So Nate, what do you think?
I am not promising that I won't get drinks after an event sometimes here and there. But look, I played some online events yesterday, and what happened is because of this flight thing we'll talk about later on, right? My schedule got very messed up over the weekend. Basically, I haven't eaten very much, and I was playing some online tournaments and was fucking starving and on hanger tilt.
Hangry is actually a thing and has been studied in psychology.
It wasn't even irrational. It's I really need some fucking food. I want to double up or go home because I didn't really manage my eating schedule properly. It's a 7-week event. If you're here for 4 days or a week or something, you maybe can burn the candle at both ends a little bit more. But remember, the most high stakes decisions that you make are later on in an event. You can play beautiful poker on day 1, day 2. If you make your goal, make it to day 3 or something, and then you start to get hanger tilt or exhaustion tilt or whatever else, then it's really negative EV, right? Even if you're plus EV to make the money, if you blow it, and I've seen so many guys blow it on day 3, day 4 of events, then you're flushing your money down the toilet. So yeah, look, I'm not judgmental. If you're somebody who has a routine that involves different things, then that's fine. If you eat more calories or less, or you drink or you don't, or whatever, I'm not here to judge, but it requires a lot of time and concentration, and that has cumulative effects over the course of the event. So every decision you make away from the table affects in some way your decision at the table.
So it sounds, Nate, like you agree with my number 1 tip that you think that this is important.
I'm going to have you, since I have so many good tips for you, I have 21. They're like my babies.
Oh, so you can't pick your top 3?
I'm going to have you they're all equally good. And one of the important things in poker is you have to sometimes randomize when you're indifferent between good options. So I'm going to have you randomly pick between 1 and 21. If it's one of the worst tier of the 21, then I'll veto it, right? Give me a number from 1 to 21.
Okay. Well, I actually have no idea what number any of your tips are because I read that when it came out, which was now a few weeks ago. All right. Okay. Let's go with number 6.
Six is that's a logistics thing for how you get your money to the World Series. Give me a different one.
Nate,
Maria.
Come on. All right. So sometimes, this is actually a really, really good point. When you truly randomize at the poker table, you have to do what your randomization tells you. So by the way, randomization at the poker table means if there's a decision that you take X% of the time, say 20% of the time, and one that you take 80% of the time, you can actually randomize and say, okay, if I have a number, from 0 to 100, if it's below 20, then I take the 20% decision. And if it's above 20, I take the 80% decision. But if you roll 15, you have to do that. And sometimes you're like, you know what? Fuck you, randomizer. I'm just going to do what I want to do. I call or I raise or I do this. That's not why you randomize. So Nate, if we're truly randomizing, this is not why you randomize. If you truly think that every single one of your tips is equally valid, then your number 1 tip is going to be about how to register for the World Series. I'm sorry.
I told you that in advance. That was part of the strategy. This is my 1 veto. Pick a different number.
Okay, fine. This is your 1 veto. I'm going on record saying that I object. All right. Tip number 13.
This is a good one. Expect to come home with less money than you started with. I was talking with one of our mutual friends a couple of years ago. I won't name him because it was a dinner conversation. Maybe you were there. I forget, right? This is someone who'll be regarded as one of the probably top 10 tournament poker players of all time, right? And he's like, yeah, I had a losing summer, and that's usually how it works if you run the math. So this is for a player who's playing lots of events, almost all the events, various tilt and mixed game events too. But even if you're a player with a large edge, having, say, 50 entries over a 6-week tournament or 7-week tournament, the math says that, because so much of the money is concentrated in getting final tables in first place, you're probably going to lose money over the course of the series. And if you're coming in for 3 weeks, like I am over 2 stretches this year, even more likely. In fact, according to some simulations I ran from my book, over a full year, 200 entries in live poker tournaments, a winning player is still almost 50-50 to have a losing year. So coming in, looking at the opportunity of I may do great, it may go well, but it's often going to be 12 bullets is a term poker players use, slightly violent term for an entry into a tournament, right? It might be 12, 15, 17 bullets, no cashes. It might be 23 bullets, 2 minimum cashes. That's how poker works. Not just a lot of time, but most of the time, frankly.
I think that's actually a really good tip. And I think that that's a really important tip for life, that in general, when you do something where you take risks, you have to think and plan accordingly and realize that it might go not your way. And so I'm actually going to fast forward to my tip number 3 because it's very related to this. And then we can go back to tip number 2, which is keeping your bankroll management strict. So what I mean by that is when you come out here or when you're making any sort of decision, when you're going to be spending money, plan out ahead of time your entire bankroll and stick to it. So my first ever summer out here in Vegas for the World Series, I didn't do that because, I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I was researching my book and I got caught up in it. There's this event called the Colossus, or as I like to call it, not affectionately after that summer, the Colass Hole, because it has a million possible reentries. And it's a very low price point. I think it was like $500 or $600, which for the World Series, that's kind of about as low as it gets. But you can enter it like 10 times or 12 times. I don't even remember. And I remember playing and busting and playing and busting. And I think I only had 2 bullets budgeted for this event. And I kept going because everyone around me was like, oh, this event is such great value. You really have to re-enter. It's amazing. And I was like, yeah, you're right. It's great value. I have to re-enter. And do you know what? I was the great value, right? I didn't know what I was doing that summer. I did not play well. Like I was just learning the game. I went way over my head. They correctly got me to re-enter and then they took my money again and again. And that was a really expensive and really important lesson for me, that when you're emotional, when you're kind of in the heat of the moment, it's easy to get caught up and say, what's an extra $500 when I've already budgeted 10,000? No, your budget has to be strict. Your bankroll has to be strict. And this is true of any risky decision that you take, whether you're a trader or whether, it doesn't really matter. Otherwise you're going to go broke and that's not a fun feeling. And I think this is actually quite related to your tip number 1.
I mean, look, it does depend kind of whether you see yourself as a professional or an amateur, and we probably do have some people in that audience who are here as recreational players. It's a little bit different. I still don't like to play any event where I think I'm negative EV, negative expected value, or if I do, I want to play the cheaper events, right? I will enter some mixed game event for say $1,500, or maybe I'm negative 10% ROI. I'm not going to enter some $10,000 tournament.
What's
where
ROI,
I think I don't have
Nate?
Return on investment, right? And this is disputed kind of how much money an ROI is for a good or a decent player, but plausibly, if you enter like, say, a $1,000 event with a very soft field, your expected value in that event might be a few $100. I think some people are just optimistic, but I think for good tournament pros and even good amateurs, those fields are so soft where your EV expected value might be $300 for a $1,000 entry. But if it's below zero, if you play the tournament a million times, I lose money on average. Even if I can afford to take that loss, I just psychologically something about that feels like it's burning money, unless it's a game I'm trying to learn more when it's an investment in the long term.
I think that's a great point. So Nate, I'm gonna play the lottery again.
Okay,
right?
play the lottery.
1 to 21. Let's go with 21.
So your skill set is worth thinking about early in the main event, but don't get carried away in other settings. So this means, let's say we come in and we find the field of our dreams, right? It's all recreational players. Some of the pros aren't here yet. It's a very soft tournament. People can, I think, go too far sometimes in saying, well, I have a skill edge relative to the field. The fact is that if you have, for example, if you're able to get a 55-45 coin flip so-called situation, so you win 55% of your coin flips, that's actually very, very, very good if you're a professional gambler. A sports bettor who won 55% of his or her bets consistently would beat the books and be on their way to being a very successful person at their craft. Now, if you're playing the main event, which will happen in 7 weeks' time, we'll have more segments on it. That's the one exception. That's where you only get one entry. It's a $10,000 entry, so it's there's not some alternative way to spend your time and your money that's equally good. And the field is so soft relative to the buy-in level that I think you actually might want to be a little bit more risk averse on day 1 and day 2. But generally speaking, gambling is about pushing small edges. Don't underestimate your opponents either, even though there are more weak opponents at the World Series than in most venues. So it's like, yeah, you have to take risks to win a poker tournament.
I got nothing to add to that, Nate. I think you have to take risks is a really, really good is a good summation of something that's super important and something that I need to learn from, because I am someone who has consistently struggled with taking enough risks. That's counter to my personality. I'm more of a risk averse person, and I've really, really worked hard to kind of work on that side, because you do have to take the correct risks based on the situation, based on the odds, based on the math and the percentages, not based on how you're feeling, which actually goes to my tip 2, going back in time, since we already covered tip 3. This is my final tip, which is mental game and working on your mental game. So what I mean by that is that when you're playing poker, when you're in a decision-making environment that's extremely high stress and high pressure, and where you're going to get tired, because even if you've gotten beautiful rest and all of this, you're playing 12, 13-hour days. This is a really long time to be thinking hard and making good decisions. You're going to get cognitively depleted. You're going to get emotional. There will be moments where you get angry because someone pissed you off. There will be moments when you are upset because you lost a big hand. There's moments when you're going to be elated because you've won a big hand. And all of those things are going to mean that you are tilting. Tilting means putting emotion into your game instead of just doing the logical, rational decision. And my advice to you is to sit down and figure out, okay, what makes you tilt? How do you tilt? And then to respond accordingly in the moment. I always say it's better to take a break, to actually physically get up from the table, take a lap. You might miss a hand, but you're not going to misplay that hand, right? And it will help you cool off. It will help you actually physically remove yourself from that situation. Whatever you need to do to detilt, be aware of it and do it. And there's no shame in it. Everyone tilts. And this is something that distinguishes the truly great players from the ones who are just mathematically very good, is their mental game, their ability to thrive under pressure. So that's my final tip. And I think it's a very important one.
Maria, we're in the lightning round here. I need one more number. Roll that roulette wheel. Let's hope for a good one.
All right, let's do number 5.
It's okay. I'll spin this into something better than it is. I'm bluffing a little bit here.
It's poker after all.
Number 5 is, as we are both doing, stay within walking distance of the World Series of Poker. The broader lesson here is that you really want to minimize distractions. You do not want to have the worry about fighting through traffic or finding a parking space. The hotels are actually quite nice here, as is Maria's apartment, by the way. But like, once you get in deep in an event, right, you are on the clock for 12 hours a day. Let's say that you want to sleep 7 hours. Let's say you want to eat something in the morning. Let's say you want to work out. Let's say you want to have a little bit of study time, right? Let's say you need an hour to wind down and have a drink in the evening, which you often do if you've had a long day, right? All of a sudden you have committed like 24, 25 hours already. So the last thing you want to do is have to worry about like a long commute to the cute Airbnb you bought 40 minutes out of town where you can't find any grocery store that's open late or anything like that. I've even had things where if I made like day 3 of an event, I got a different hotel room closer to that venue, because at that point, even like an extra hour of sleep is worth an awful lot.
Great. Well, Nate, I hope that you are staying close to the hotel this time. And I am so excited to see you in a few hours and play our first event together during this World Series.
I'm already registered, Maria.
So am I, Nate. So am I.
Okay, perfect.
Let's do it.
So Maria, last Thursday, the 23rd, the SEC approved an ETF application for Ethereum. We have a variety of listeners who are ranged from, I'm sure, very crypto knowledgeable to thinking this is all Greek to them. Can you kind of explain down the middle pathway, our median listener, what happened and why this is significant?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, an ETF is an exchange traded fund. So that means that it's a fund where you pool securities and then you can trade that pool of securities like stocks. And so what this means is that, people can participate in that broad pool of stocks without actually having to pick every single one themselves. So it's a big deal in the financial markets. Last year, there started to be rumblings that Bitcoin and Ether, which are kind of the two biggest cryptocurrencies, were going to get ETFs of their own. And that ended up happening this past January with Bitcoin. So that was the first ETF that was actually approved in the crypto space, which was absolutely just huge news, because suddenly, mom and pop, Joe next door, people who don't really know much about crypto, might have been a little too risk averse to kind of trade Bitcoin or buy Bitcoin directly. Now in their retirement accounts and all of these different things in their investments, they can actually just get the ETF and they can feel like they're participating in this cryptocurrency, in this movement, by buying it. And so then everyone was really excited and was like, oh, wow, are you going to approve ETH? And it seemed like the answer was going to be no. And it seemed like the answer was going to be no for a number of reasons, not least of all because the Democrats, especially after what happened with Sam Bankman-Fried and that whole fiasco, have been very kind of crypto skeptical and have really shied away from entering that world. And the SEC has not been very friendly to the crypto space. So people thought that the chances of an approval for ETH were going to be incredibly low. And then last week, that changed. On Thursday, the approval actually went through. We went from basically this ain't happening to holy shit, it just happened in 4 days. And so maybe we just jump ahead and talk a little bit about the significance of the approval in broader political context, because obviously, I'll just kind of nod to the fact that there's obviously financial, it's very important for the financial markets, and we've talked about that. But now I think the crucial question is why now, right? Why did we go from 25% to 75% to boom, where people who really know this area were like, it's never happening, it ain't happening. Then we're like, holy shit, it happened. And I think that a lot of that does boil down to politics. And Nate, to the points that you were making, who is the audience of crypto? Who are they voting for? And how do they see you if you oppose cryptocurrencies? Because a lot of people in crypto are what's called single issue voters, right? If you're pro crypto, they're going to vote for you. If you're seen as anti-crypto, they ain't going to vote for you. And this is true of the president. It's true of senators. It's true of Republicans.
Yeah, look, another factor is timing. We're now a year and a half removed from FTX blowing up. Whether to blame crypto per se for Sam Bankman-Fried is a longer discussion than I think we have time for right now. But look, if Silicon Valley thinks they can make money off this, and Wall Street thinks they can make money off this, and the people who care more about crypto might be swing voters, gettable votes more than the people who are moralistic about it or whatnot, then, look, in the end, we actually are a pretty risk-taking country, the United States, and it's hard to bottle that up, especially if both parties kind of sense that this is some emerging group of voters. I mean, it's still relatively small, right? I don't want to exaggerate. I mean, if you made a list of the 20 most important issues in the election, crypto might be somewhere between 17 and not on the list, right? Let's not exaggerate too much. But as you're fighting for scarce real estate, these disaffected younger voters who are not super into watching cable news or things like that are actually voters who may be gettable for either campaign. And so I can see why they're trying to think about that square on the chessboard a little bit.
So Nate, we were talking earlier today about poker and about the importance of small edges, and that if you're a gambler, if you're a risk taker, if you're any sort of decision maker, if you have an edge, even if it's, a 2% edge, you need to take that edge, right? Because over time, that's actually going to be important. I think that that's a really crucial point when we're talking about something like crypto here, because as we've already talked about, I think every single week of the Risky Business podcast, this is going to be a close election, no matter what, right? The two candidates right now, Trump and Biden, are neck and neck, and these small percentages might end up mattering, especially in swing states. And so if we look at the crypto voting block and we say, okay, there are a lot of people who are voting for whom this is very important. And it seems like if we're anti-crypto, we might lose some votes, but not gain any votes. But if we're pro crypto, we're probably not going to lose any votes because, people don't care enough, but we might gain votes from that, younger, swath of the population that does actually care about that. And that's an important calculus when you're a politician.
Yeah, look, Trump also has demonstrated a willingness to go and ask for anybody's vote. He was in the Bronx the other day. New York is not a swing state, but trying to signal his support for young African-American men, which is a group he has gained among in the polls, way behind, but better than he had been in previous years. He was at the Libertarian nominating convention over the weekend where he was booed, but did pledge to nominate a Libertarian to his cabinet, which is kind of an actual thing, right? If you'd like a Libertarian Treasury Secretary or something, that's like actually pretty significant. But Trump, as a real estate developer, has always understood that an underdeveloped parcel of real estate is worth taking. That's often a plus ROI, plus EV investment, right? Here's this like blighted piece of real estate where actually the fundamentals aren't so bad. Maybe you can fix it up and make a profit on it. And I'm not going to comment on Donald Trump's like real estate portfolio management skills necessarily. But that instinct, I think, is actually one of the things I think I would give him the most compliments on as a politician, that Trump like understood the landscape was changing in 2016. The traditional GOP coalition was losing. He would build a new coalition. And, why isn't Biden also speaking at the Libertarian conference and saying, because none of these candidates, including, by the way, RFK Jr., who at some point had a flirtation with libertarians, none of these candidates are good for libertarians, like whatsoever, right? But Biden should say, look, we're better on reproductive rights, right? We're better on freedom of the press and make something about free speech. And Biden seems a little bit risk averse to try to reach out to new groups. Maybe he's afraid of getting booed, and I'm not sure if Trump will want to play the news clips from the weekend. But he is trying to go after that 1 in 100 or 1 in even 1,000 voter that can make a difference if the elections have been as close as they were in the past 2 cycles.
Yeah, and I think that this is a very positive development actually for the Biden campaign, because it does, even though he is more risk averse, I think that this does signal that they are paying attention and they are starting to do kind of what needs to be done to get those votes that they need to get. And so Nate, we were talking earlier about what we were going to talk about today, and you said, let's not do a politics segment. So I said, let's do this cryptocurrency segment. And it turns out that in an election year, everything becomes a politics segment to a certain extent, because I do not think we would be talking about this. I do not think the ETH ETF would have been approved if we were not in an election year, and if that didn't kind of light the fire under politicians, under Biden, to actually do things that might be distasteful to them on some level, might be more of a risk than they would otherwise want to take, but that they are now willing to take because it's an election. So Nate, everything is about the election. So Nate, as we mentioned earlier, we're both in Las Vegas, and I think we both feel incredibly lucky to be here because our flight experiences this Memorial Day weekend were anything but smooth. So I, for one, found myself sitting in LaGuardia Airport and getting an alert that my flight was going to be, delayed first by an hour, then 2 hours, then 2.5 hours, and finally 2 hours and 55 minutes. And at that point, we started, we started boarding, and it ended up being delayed by 3.5 hours. But by that point, everyone was on the plane, and it was just a nightmare, and not something that I was very happy with. So I'm happy to have made it here, but I know that you have had a less than stellar flight experience as well, and I think also, the fact that our final official delay was 2 hours and 55 minutes before it was pushed while everyone was on the plane also has some significance.
Yeah, I was flying from Westchester County Airport, HPN, I think is the call sign. And you can't fly direct to Vegas from there, but you can connect either choice of Atlanta or Detroit. Being from Michigan, I chose Detroit. It had a much longer connection time. I don't trust 39 minutes in Atlanta. And I got that American Express card where you get Sky Lounge access. I'm like, so we're circling in and like it's starting to take a while. I'm like, weren't we supposed to have landed half an hour ago? Maybe I'm just like kind of misremembering things, right? We keep circling and then we get the pilot comes on, right? And he's like, well, folks. And from the tone of his voice, it's going to be a really bad well, folks, right? And he's like,
well, folks, is never good, Nate.
we're running out of fuel. We have to land in he didn't say fucking. We have to land in Buffalo. So we're going backward. We thought we were in Detroit. And this is really bad. I had things where I had to be like on the ground somewhere, business calls, online poker, stupid crap. I had to be like on the ground on Monday. I couldn't be flying on Monday, basically. So that could have really scrambled the whole trip, maybe including this podcast potentially. On the ground, there's kind of like Lord of the Fly, or not really. It's actually, the pilot basically came and said, we can deplane, but if we deplane, there's a lot more paperwork. And so let's take a vote, basically. And people are like, yeah, let's stay on, except for one guy. They had to warn him. They have to tell him, we want you to know, sir, you may have to be in Buffalo, New York for up to 24 hours. Here's a liability waiver in case something happens to you. We do make it back to Detroit, and then because the whole rest of the flights have also been scrambled by this Midwestern thunderstorm, my original flight is also 3 hours late, so I get into Vegas at like 1:30 in the morning. So all is well that ends well, I suppose. But apropos of this, there are some new government regulations that would have covered, I think, both of our situations. This was released last week by the federal, by Mayor Pete. The Mayor Pete Department of Transportation issued a whole new set of rules last week governing compensation for passengers under a variety of circumstances. For example, a domestic flight delayed by 3+ hours or an international flight 6+ hours. If there's an extra connection, like my flight to Buffalo, or you land at a different airport because of a diversion, if your bags aren't delivered in 12 hours, this guarantees you can get compensation in a transparent way and with cash, not just some mileage credit that you may or may not be able to use later on. So it's an effort to kind of streamline and standardize punishments to airlines, compensation to passengers when you have a really annoying flight delay. So Maria, first reaction to that. This, by the way, is like part of a Biden administration series of on junk fees or non-transparent fees.
Yeah, no, I mean, part of me says, hallelujah, good. Like, we need to hold airlines accountable. But some of these things, like, I can see the argument that, okay, it might not be great for like smaller airlines, blah, blah, blah. But honestly, airlines haven't given a fuck about us for so long and have tried to kind of push their edges. You have fees for all your checked bags. You have no leg room. Like, they try to just cram you on the plane. They have terrible customer service most of the time. So I say, like, yay these rules. And like, I don't check baggage because it gets lost all the time. Like, yes, please compensate me if I have to check it and you lose it. Like, this seems like something on an emotional level. And I know here we're all about rational and logical risk taking and decision making, but this is something, airline travel is something that people react to emotionally. I'm emotional about it, and good. I'm happy. I want the airlines to have to pay for when they actually do this. Because, as a consumer, when big corporations try to take advantage of me, that doesn't feel good. And so I do think that I'm acknowledging that I'm coming from an incorrect decision-making framework, but the hedonic value is actually a big part of my expected value here.
So I'm going to come at it from like an economist standpoint, where in some ways to have regulations can actually be beneficial to the industry from a game theory standpoint. So let me kind of give you an example, which is if you go to like an online dating profile, right, and you look at different men who are trying to maybe exaggerate favorably their height or their age or other things, other features about them, right?
I love that, Nate. Other features.
Other features. You wind up with what's kind of a prisoner's dilemma, believe it or not, where let's say everyone exaggerates their height by 2 inches and you have the same incentive to do it. Unless you're maybe so tall that like 6'4" versus 6'6" doesn't matter all that much. By the way, NBA players do this by maybe an inch or so as well. But the point is that, passengers know that when they book an airline ticket, or even more, it's worse with hotels, by the way, with the resort fees, where the hell they call them. They know there are a lot of like extra add-on fees, and therefore, if you want to like, let's say, we're a hotel that has like all-in pricing, there's no hidden fees. Well, it's still going to appear more expensive on Expedia or whatnot. So to have like standards that regulate what fees are included or kind of what compensation you get if you're late might actually be okay and lead to more transparency for consumers in general and have less deadweight loss is the economics term. With that said, this will be kind of priced into the cost of a ticket. If every time you fly, there's a 1% chance of a circumstance that would cause the airline to have to pay out $1,000 fine or something, then adds $10 in expected value. And therefore it's kind of like a piece of insurance bundled with the ticket. But the only critique I have, other than it's not free money, right? It will get priced in, is could this create perverse incentives toward the airlines doing things that are unsafe in an effort to avoid these large fees potentially?
Yeah, that's actually something that I hadn't thought about, and that would be really problematic. I would hope that that doesn't happen, because the first time that a plane crashes or something goes terribly wrong because they cut a corner, the cost of that is so incredibly high to the airline, to the image, to the perception, that I hope that they wouldn't do that. That said, we hoped that Boeing wouldn't do some of the things they did. So sometimes that decision-making calculus is also a little bit different. But I'm glad that kind of the game theory of this also aligns with my own emotional desire to have these things not happen. One interesting thing, I thought you were actually going to go somewhere with the perverse incentives, the 2 hours and 55 minutes. Basically, like at that point, when you see that delay, like as a consumer, I should now be like, okay, there's no way it's 2 hours and 55 minutes. This is actually going to be delayed by more than 3 hours. And they're trying to keep me here so that I don't cancel and don't claim my refund. And they're trying to gain that.
It's like 2:58, right? And they're like, everyone's got to get seated now or else we're going to hit the 3 hours. Oh shit, I have a bathroom emergency. I have to go right now, right? And you make everyone on the plane $1,000, right? We go to the local casino in Buffalo or whatever and, have a great time.
That's a good outcome. Is there a local casino in Buffalo, Nate?
I was looking this up. There was Casino Niagara. I was not sure whether I bought my passport or not, right? But potentially I could have wound up in Niagara Falls, Canada, playing some 1-2, I don't know, 1-2 limit. I don't know what the fuck they have in Niagara Falls.
Nate, that makes me so happy. I'm so glad that as you were being diverted to Buffalo in this horrible situation, where your mind goes is there a casino nearby? We haven't really talked about this, but I think that I affectionately think of Nate as, my one of my most degen-y friends, and degen is short for a degenerate gambler. And it's a term of great affection in this particular case. And, people have more or less degen in them, which also, I think, has to do with appetite for risk. And Nate, you, as the degen that I know and love, I'm so glad that you were looking up casinos. I would have been looking up, if I had been stuck there, I would have been like, eater hit list Buffalo. Is there anywhere good to eat, or am I going to be just completely?
There's the one famous Buffalo Anchor Bar, I think it's called. And having not been to Buffalo maybe since I was like 8 or whatever, right? Anchor Bar, Casino Niagara, get the 6 a.m. earliest possible Delta flight to Detroit, and from there we have options. Once you're in Detroit, that's a real airport. Then the world's your oyster. But we had a whole game plan in case the flight never left Buffalo again.
So Nate, let's just kind of sum this up. Obviously, nobody likes to be delayed, right? Nobody likes this kind of stuff to happen, and it seems that we agree for even though we're coming from different angles. I'm coming from a very emotional, tilty angle, and you're coming from the correct risk-taking game theoretic framework angle, that there are a lot of good things that can come from these regulations. What does this mean just for us as decision makers on a broader level?
Maybe it means you can be like a little bit more risk-taking with your travel plans, because you do get compensated in some way. You may get made partially whole if you're late, or at the margin. I mean, look, I still think people are actually much too willing to make connecting flights. I think paying a premium for a direct flight is worth it, not just because it saves you time, but because it's just literally 2x less likely to have a problem getting to your destination if you have one flight instead of two, right? So, but at the margin now, you can take riskier options, I suppose, if you don't mind the cash compensation in terms of flying out of an airport that has more delays, or making a connection when you wouldn't otherwise. So at the margin, if you're a real EV maximizer for flight stuff, then it affects your plans a little bit.
Well, I appreciate that, Nate. But as for me personally, if there's any chance of me ending up in Buffalo, I think I'm going to play it safe.
I hope we have some Buffalonian listeners who will understand that I am pro Buffalo and Maria is anti Buffalo. I would have enjoyed Anchor Bar. Would have enjoyed Casino Niagara. If there were a Sabres game, I would have gone, I'm sure. So Bills game, I'd be thrilled. So I'm pro Buffalo.
All right. But Nate, we don't have to be in Buffalo right now. We're in Las Vegas, and we have to end this podcast here because we are both running out to play our first event for which we're both registered, and we're so excited.
In fact, we're going to Paris. But the Paris, Las Vegas, All Suites Hotel and Casino to play in the event number 1 of the 2024 World Series of Poker.
Absolutely, Nate. Let's do it. I will see you there, and I will see you at dinner where we will both have heaps and heaps and heaps of chips.
Talk to you soon, Maria.
Risky Business is hosted by me, Maria Konnikova.
And me, Nate Silver.
The show is a co-production of Pushkin Industries and iHeartMedia. This episode was produced by Isabel Carter. Our associate producer is Gabriel Hunter Chang. Our executive producer is Jacob Goldstein.
If you like the show, please rate and review us so other people can find us more easily. And if you want to listen to an ad-free version, sign up for Pushkin Plus. For $6.99 a month, you get access to ad-free listening. Thanks for tuning in.